We're going to start with the welcome and roll call and announcements. Let's do the roll call first. Let's see, where are we here? For the Senate, tell me if you're present and alone. If you're on Zoom, and if you're here, we'll assume you're with somebody.
Present. And I'm,
Thank you, Senator.
Meg Turner is my with me, my committee clerk.
Thank you. Senate Water Land, excused. The House EEP,
I think she'll be joining later.
with, Representative Lowen will be joining us later. House Water and Land, excused. The chairperson of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, excused. The chairperson of the Department of Agriculture,
Here.
with plenty of company.
Yes, not alone.
Not alone. The CEO of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, excused. The chairperson of DHHL or designee. Katie, is that you? I think you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Katie, can you wave if you can hear me? No, apparently not. We'll wait till, we'll come back. And I am, let's see, I think I'm representing the director of DBED today as well as the.
Nope. You're the director of OPSD.
I know I am.
But that's a separate.
I don't get two votes. Sorry.
That's a separate.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
But that's Mark Glick.
Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Here. And I'm alone.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, and Department of Transportation?
I'm Melissa Miranda Johnson here for Director Sniffen and alone.
Thank you, Miranda, Melissa. And then for representing Department of Health?
Hi, Diana Felton here on behalf of Director Fink.
Thank you. Representing the Department of Education? Excused. Representing the City and County's Department of Planning and Permitting? Excused.
No, Noelle's
No,
here.
that's me. Sorry. Noelle Cole, representing Director Takuchi Apuna. I'm present and alone.
Thank you very much. For the Maui Department of Planning?
I guess he's not here yet. He said he was going to come.
Excused. And for the Hawaii Island Department of Planning?
Aloha, Zendo Kern, Planning Director, present and alone.
Thank you, Director Kern. And for the Kauai Department of Planning?
I don't see.
Excused. Okay, and representing the Adjutant General? Excused. And the manager of the Coastal Zone Management Program is excused. Okay. And
Don Chang.
Co-chair.
Co-chair, DLNR.
thank you. My apologies. No. Okay. Let's see, do we have announcements? Do you see Scott?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who was on? Yeah, he's here.
Scott Glenn, it's my pleasure to announce, will be policy lead for climate, and I want him to introduce himself in his new role. He's a former co-chair of this commission, and to share a little bit about what he'll be working on that relates to the commission. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Aloha, everyone. Good to see you all again. I'm now in the governor's office serving as senior advisor, helping him out with federal affairs, in particular pursuing federal funding under the IIJA and the IRA, as well as climate policy and housing policy, and which are some big buckets, but they all work together in trying to help Hawaii move forward on a lot of the key initiatives for Governor Green. So I look forward to the opportunity to work with the Climate Commission more, and we'll be around. And Leah has my new email, but please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We will be reaching out.
Just real quick, Katie can hear us now.
Oh, Katie, coming back to you. You're still muted, but it looks like you can hear us. Go ahead, Katie.
Yes,
This is-
hi. I apologize. I'm not sure why my earphones weren't working, but I can hear you now. And I am Katie Ducat, Deputy Director for DHHL.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we'll acknowledge, let's see, Joe Dunn with DLNR.
Yep.
Joe, go ahead. And Kira Williams with the Hawaii State Energy Office. Thank you, Mark. And we'll thank you for both of your support for this commission and this meeting. And let's see, are there any other
Announcements. Yeah, we have some in the audience.
yes, go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Ketty Loeb. I am with the UH Manoa's Institute for Sustainability and Resilience. And I'm here today to let you all know that on Monday, we will be launching a survey on the topic of sea level rise, risk, people's risk perceptions and policy preferences. This survey will be targeted towards elected officials in the state of Hawaii, so Senate and House representatives, as well as the city councils of the 4 counties. And we will be sharing back the results of the survey to you all, and happy to answer questions. I'm available at the ISR office anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Co-chair, would you like to introduce your staff that are in attendance?
Oh, okay. We have a little bit of hand signals here. No, thank you. Okay. I'm going to let my staff introduce themselves and say a little bit about themselves. Michael?
Michael Kane, Administrator, Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. So we're on the front lines of trying to find out how to actually respond to climate change and coastal issues. So here as an observer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Amy Wirtz with UHC Grant. I work directly with the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands on coastal processes, policies, sea level rise.
Thank you, Amy.
Aloha, Leah Laramie. I'm the Hawaii State Climate Coordinator. We also have a few other additional vistas with us. We have Dante here, and we also have Jesus and Trinity and Cara. If you can put on your cameras and do a quick wave. And we also, yeah. And we also have our AG Cindy Young here.
Oh, great.
Oh, there's Cindy. Oh, great, Cindy.
Terrific. Thank
Thank
you. Okay. Well, move on to our action item for the minutes of February 16th.
We don't have quorum right now, so we may want to.
Okay, we'll
do it.
defer the minutes until we have a quorum. Thank you very much, Leah. So we'll move on to item 3, which is a presentation on the 2023 legislative update. Chair Gabbard, would you like to proceed?
Yes, aloha.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear, everybody hear me okay?
We
Yes.
can, and we can
Great.
see your
Roman kako.
presentation.
So I hope you and your ohana are well, and I apologize because something has come up and I'm going to have to leave right after my presentation. But my office manager and committee clerk, Meg Turner, she'll stay on and take notes and if there are any questions. But this is what I'll be talking about today, focus on the Senate bills, and then when Rep. Lowen comes on, she'll provide details on any House bills. So this past session was my 7th year chairing the Ag Environment Committee, or AEN. Meg, are you doing? Yeah, here we go. And there were 254 bills that were referred to AEN. 63 were environmental bills, 191 were ag. And 55 total bills made it to conference committee near the end of session. And as you all know, we're the House and Senate, we try to tweak the bills and get some agreement. And out of those 55, 8 were environmental bills and 47 were ag. So 17 passed the final reading in the House and Senate and have been transmitted to the governor. And of those 17, 4 were environmental bills and 13 were ag bills. And as you can see, SB 422, that was a small housekeeping measure that was related to the Environmental Advisory Council. And that's already been signed and passed prior to conference starting as Act 024. Okay, so of the 8 environmental bills that made it to conference, 3 are waiting for the governor's signature. And here they are on the governor's desk, patiently awaiting. And I'll go into more detail about them in a moment. They are SB 986, the disposal of solid waste, SB 1024 on transportation emissions, and SB 1417 on sea level rise. And here are the 5 bills that are dead on arrival. HB 197, the refrigerant management program having to do with hydrofluorocarbons, which, as you know, are used in air conditioning, refrigeration, and insulating foam. They were used to replace substances that were depleting the ozone, but now they're building up in the atmosphere and acting as greenhouse gases, thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide. So this measure is to create a program, it is to create a program reducing HFCs, and so it's dead. HB 837, on green infrastructure, requiring green sustainable design concepts for public infrastructure to reduce carbon emissions. And then HB 1396, cesspool conversion. And this one here, this bill in particular established a county cesspool pilot program in the Department of Health to work with each county to identify a priority area to expand the county sewage system. It also creates a cesspool conversion section in the Department of Health to facilitate the conversion of cesspools. Also created a comprehensive public outreach strategy to educate homeowners regarding the state's cesspool deadlines, and also established an income tax credit for the cost of upgrading or converting cesspools. And so that one's dead. Next is SB 445 on pollution abatement, increasing civil penalties for the violation of various pollution provisions, and appropriated funds for an environmental health specialist position within the clean water branch of the Department of Health. And finally, SB 504 on PFAS, prohibiting the manufacture and sale and distribution for use of any food packaging or serviceware, cosmetic or personal care products that contain PFAS, and this also died. But there was a reso that was adopted, and so HB 748, which was the companion in the House on PFAS, I think Nicole, she introduced and worked really hard on that one, and so that one also stalled in the Finance Committee, but she'll be speaking to that one, I'm sure, when she gets on. Okay, next, the cattle call. In passing, I just wanted to mention the so-called cattle call at this year's session because, you know, it took us all by surprise, right? And it was a dynamic that none of us planned for going into conference. So approximately 2 hours before the 6 p.m. voting deadline, leadership decided it'd be more efficient to get all the committees into one big room, room 309, to vote on their bills. And with one caveat, if your bill was not on a list of approved WAM or finance, Ways and Means or finance bills that were approved, we were instructed not to bother showing up for the final vote as the bill was dead. And so, believe me, that was not easy to accept after all the work that we did to get these bills to conference. But as many of you know, such is the life of a bill. The major lesson I've learned over my 19 years as a lawmaker is patience and determination and working with stakeholders and colleagues. And so, you know, sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years for a good bill to pass. And so, with that said, here are some of the priority Senate environmental bills and their status. And these are in alphabetical order, not by priority. But I did want to mention, I did briefly mention SB 422, the Environmental Advisory Council Housekeeping Bill. That it deleted a reference in the repeal section of the revised statutes. So that one, as I mentioned, Act 24 was signed on April 19th. And then here are the other environmental bills that passed the House and the Senate, and as I mentioned before, and that are on the governor's desk. So SB 966, the illegal and improper dumping, especially of hazardous materials and construction and demolition waste, can obviously pollute the environment, thereby harming human health and incurring economic consequences. And so what this bill does is authorizes the forfeiture of any vehicle owned and operated by a person in the commission of an illegal dumping offense to curb and deter and prevent further illegal dumping operations in the state. Next was the Zero Emissions Transportation Bill, or SB 1024. This establishes long-term goals for zero emissions transportation in Hawaii and abroad to reduce and eliminate transportation emissions. Establishes the Clean Ground Transportation Working Group and the Inter-Island and Clean Transportation Working Group, and also requires the report to our Climate Commission and the reporting to the Climate Commission and to the legislature. And then sea level rise, SB 1417. And this one affects me personally because we've lived in Kalailoa, formerly Barbers Point Naval Air Station, for over 19 years. The House Companion Bill, HB 1159, stalled in the Senate. And so this is the Kaka'ako Community Development District and Kalailoa Community Development District. They're particularly threatened by the effects of climate change, including sea level rise, king tides, heavy rainfall, and other climate change related events. So this measure requires the HCDA to consider the impacts of climate change in the design and construction of buildings in both Kaka'ako and Kalailoa community development districts. Okay, so what's next? Now it's a waiting game, of course, till the close of business on Monday, June 26th, this coming Monday, to see if the governor sends us his intent to veto. And if he does that, then he has to deliver the official veto by July 11th. And then I'd like to go through the priority environmental bills that did not pass. Out of 63 environmental bills referred to AEN, 4 passed the House and Senate and 59 failed. That's right, 4 passed and 59 failed. So that's pretty dismal. And unfortunately, all of my priority bills died. So I've been asked to review them and also to share a sneak peek into next session. So I'll go over the top 10 that didn't pass. And briefly, in these are in alphabetical order. But first, here are those bills that technically they didn't pass, but they had money allocated from the budget. And that was SB 419 relating to carbon sequestration. And this one assists farmers helping the state reach renewable energy goals and provides incentives for carbon smart land management. You might recall in last year, I introduced Senate Bill 3225, the Hawaii Carbon Smart Land Management Assistant Pilot Program, which passed into Act 185. And the goal of that pilot program was to provide incentives for farmers and foresters to manage their lands in ways that help sequester carbon emissions. But unfortunately, that 2022 bill, the law, it did not receive any funding. So with this bill, SB 419, the idea was to provide compensation and incentives to small farmers, ranchers, foresters, and landowners and lessees for taking measures to help Hawaii decrease carbon and methane emissions. So although this year's bill, SB 419, did not pass into law, we were told that $1 million was inserted into the budget to fund the program. So believe me, I'm calling that a win. And then Hawaii Ant Lab, SB 1552, that bill appropriated $1.5 million to DLNR to support the Hawaii Ant Lab in mitigating the effects of the little fire ants in the state. And as you know, these little buggers are nasty, but instead of the $1.5 million in the bill, they got $550,000 in the budget. Okay, and then I'll cover now the bills that did not pass, and we'll try again in 2024. And also, these are in alphabetical order, not in priority. First up is SB 505, the Aquarium Trade Protections Bill. And also there was HB 910 in the House, prohibiting the harvesting of aquatic life for commercial aquarium purposes, regardless of the method of collection. I recommended that we pass it out of AEN, but unfortunately I did not have the votes in my own committee. So that bill did not pass. And the House Bill 910 was not heard. Next is the Biomass Bill, SB 425, was to remove the term biomass from the definition of renewable energy. It was referred to EET / AEN, comma CPN. And so unfortunately, the Energy, Environment, and Tourism Committee did not want to schedule a bill, so it died. Next is the Brown Water Advisory Bill, SB 508. And that one requires the Clean Water Branch to perform water quality testing during brown water advisories and post informational signs to explain health risks associated with water runoff during brown water advisories. The Ways and Means Committee did not want to hear it. This was the second year introduced, and so we'll try again next year. So hopefully third time's the charm. Number 4 is the Carbon Cashback, SB 1004, and also SB 1060. And this places a fee on carbon emissions and returns money to the people, taxing carbon and returning revenues to taxpayers. This imposes a fee on the carbon content of fossil fuels, establishes a carbon cashback trust fund into which fees will be deposited, and then dividend payments will be made to Hawaii residents. And so obviously it's meant to disincentivize the use of fossil fuels. And then moving on to number 5 is the Carbon Offset Bill, SB 421. This would have established procedures for the Department of Transportation to assist and enable a person to voluntarily purchase a verified carbon offset for carbon dioxide emissions resulting from the person's air travel to and from an airport in the state. And so the Department of Transportation did not want, not the Department, the Committee on Transportation and Cultural Arts did not want to schedule SB 421 or SB 1001. So that died early in the Senate. And then the companion bill, SB 1165, was deferred as well. And then 6, cesspool. 13 cesspool bills in the Senate and 2 rezos. None of the bills passed, but the 2 rezos did. But the bill that became the vehicle on cesspools was HB 1396 in the House, and basically establishing a county cesspool pilot program in the Department of Health to work with each county to identify a priority area to expand the county sewage system. Also creates a cesspool conversion section in Department of Health to facilitate the conversion of cesspools. Creates a comprehensive public outreach strategy and educates homeowners regarding the state cesspool deadlines. These are what I mentioned before, I know, but I wanted to go over them again. Establish an income tax credit for the cost of upgrading or converting cesspools, and then require certain information regarding cesspools to be included in seller mandatory disclosures. So this made it to conference, but you guessed it, did not have the money released from WAM and Finn, so it died. And then 7 was the Constitutional Green Amendment, Senate Bill 635, proposing a constitutional amendment to ensure that an inherent and inalienable right of the people, including future generations, to clean water and air, a healthful environment and climate, healthy native ecosystems and beaches shall be protected and shall not be infringed. This was the 3rd year that I introduced this bill. Only 3 states in the country have passed a green amendment. That's Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York. And for me, the CONAM, it means basically a statewide conversation about this whole concept in businesses and churches and government, so that people are talking about this, that it's a good thing. It did pass AEN, but the JDC/WHAM committees, Judiciary and WHAM committees did not schedule the bill. And then number 8 is green fee, SB 304. This was Chair Donovan's bill in Ways and Means. And it was only one of several green bills that were in green fee bills that were introduced. Basically, this one, SB 304, was a visitor impact fee program within DLNR through which the department would collect a fee from visitors for a license to visit a state park, forest, hiking trail, or other state natural area. To me, it's a no-brainer. 10 million tourists are visiting. They should help us pay for our upkeep of our natural resources. And out of the 8 green fee bills that were introduced this session, SB 304 became the only one. It was the only one to pass out of both the House and the Senate and make it to conference, where it did not receive WHAM-FIN release. And then number 9, packaging waste reduction, extended producer responsibility. That's SB 649, requiring the Department of Health, with the assistance from each county, to develop a statewide needs assessment to determine resources necessary to reduce packaging waste by 70% from the baseline amount. And this particular one did not get a hearing from AEN and Health and Human Services Committee. There was also SB 1458, requiring certain producers of fast-moving consumer products to register with Department of Health and pay an annual fee based on the amount of packaging volume the covered producer places on the market each calendar year. And this one died in WHAM consumer protection committees. And then finally, PFAS or forever chemicals, because they don't go away and have been in the news a lot lately. These bills, as you may recall, it was Rep. Lowen's excellent bill that passed into Act 152, HB 1644 last year, banning the manufacture, sale, or distribution or sale or use of wraps and liners, plates, food boats, and pizza boxes that contain PFAS, and prohibiting the manufacture, sale, distribution, and use of Class B firefighting foams. So this bill, SB 504, took that issue further by banning the manufacture, sale, offer for sale, distribution for sale, and distribution for use of any food packaging, food serviceware, cosmetic, or personal care products that contain or intentionally added PFAS substances. So I felt this was another critically important bill that had agreement in the House and Senate, and it made it to conference, but unfortunately it died due to no finance release. Okay, so that's basically it. And so oh my gosh, I do have to run. So if you do have any questions, please let me know by email or by phone. And I'm running late again. So again, my office manager, Meg, will be on the call to help you out. Aloha and mahalo.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. That was very, very helpful for us. Before we go on to ask commissioners if they have any legislative updates, I'd like to let you know that the representative from the Department of Transportation is here. You want to introduce yourself, Morris?
Hi, I'm Morris Atta. I'm the department's climate resiliency manager. And so I'm not an official member of the commission, but I keep track of everything.
I think you are an official representative.
No, it's Melissa. Melissa's here for DOT.
Melissa,
Miranda Johnson. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we did have Representative Nicole Lowen join, as well as our Department of Education rep. Is he still there? Kurt.
So we have 4.
Oh yeah, there he is. Yeah, Kurt's here as well. Commissioner Oetker. So if we want, we can do a vote, or we can continue with this item and then go back.
Well, let's Representative Lowen, I'm going to let you make that call. Do you want to go back and have us take a vote on the minutes of the February 16th meeting and then proceed to your presentation? Or do you want to proceed to your presentation immediately?
Can you guys all hear me? Sorry, I missed some of what you said. I just got my audio working.
Okay, we deferred our action item, the approval of the minutes of February 16th, pending getting a quorum, and you are the quorum. So we have, but you are also next on the agenda. So
Oh, you know what? Let's vote out the minutes, I guess, and clear that out first. Whatever you prefer.
Thank you, Representative Lowen. So members, we're going to return to our agenda item number 2, discussion and approval of the minutes of February 16th, 2023. Members, have you any comments or questions? And then we'll ask the public if they want to comment. No, members, hearing none. Members of the public, any comments or questions on the minutes of February 16th? Seeing none, members, are there any objections to accepting the minutes as circulated?
I'll make a motion.
You can if you want.
Yep, we need a motion.
Okay, I move to approve the minutes of February 16, 2023.
Great, we have a
Second.
Okay. All right. So are there any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted as circulated. Okay, back to item number 3, Representative Lowen, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. And Senator, we already heard from Senator Gabbard, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully there's not too much overlap. I just finished a bill signing ceremony over here in Kelowna, so I'm not sure exactly what he covered, but hopefully it's pretty similar. Leah, sorry if sometimes it's animation stuff, I don't do it on purpose. If you keep forwarding so we get the whole slide. I don't know why it does that. Okay. So this is my post-session update, kind of what we passed this legislative session and some of what we didn't pass. And I know that Leah had mentioned maybe also talking about looking ahead towards what we might introduce next session, but I'm thinking, because I'm covering a lot of the bills that didn't pass, so some of what we can expect will be to revisit some of those measures that didn't move this year, but that we hope we can get moving next year. So again, I'm Representative Nicole Lowen. I represent District 7, Kailua-Kona, and I also chair the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. And so next slide. Perfect. Okay, so I'm starting with the energy efficiency because this was one of the few places we had some really good successes. We passed 2 bills that might seem kind of wonky, but I think are pretty impactful. HB 192 will phase out the sale of fluorescent lamps, which contain mercury. These are, twice as efficient as or LEDs, which is the replacement, are twice as efficient and last longer and have a much lower light cost. And this will kind of get the, whether it's for general use in buildings or in residences. I mean, some people just maybe haven't made that transition to LEDs, and this will get them moving in that direction. It's going to save, lots of money on people's electric bills and reduce our energy consumption and keep toxic mercury out of our landfills and out of the environment. And then we also passed Senate Bill 691. And so this is adding to the appliance efficiency standards that were first enacted in 2019, I believe. I think all but one of the things on this list have no additional upfront costs, so the savings start on day one. The one item that does have some additional upfront costs, I think the payback period is like less than 6 months. And then this also includes some water efficiency, which is also energy efficiency, but includes like toilets and urinals, I believe. So it's also helping save water. And then the kind of more unnoticed, but I think more impactful thing in this bill even is that it gives power to the Hawaii State Energy Office going forward to look at appliances and what might make sense to establish state level standards for. And that gives a lot more flexibility to us being able to adopt these new standards as new products come on the market, or new advances are made in efficiency. We won't have to go through the legislature every time to do it. It will still be a rulemaking process, but I think that turning this over to the Energy Office will be a more efficient way to move forward. And then I have on here also one energy efficiency bill that didn't pass, and that was extending the energy efficiency portfolio standards out to 2045. They currently end in 2030, and obviously we need to keep pushing hard on energy efficiency. This is really one of the ways that we're going to be able to meet our very ambitious clean energy and clean transportation goals. We really have to dig deep, not only to add more generation to the grid and all of those things, but to reduce consumption in the places that we can. Luckily, work on this is continuing. I mean, the PUC and Hawaiian Electric are continuing to work on this, but we will come back to this bill next year. Next slide. And then moving on to clean transportation. So the bills that passed, number one, the Safe Routes to School bill, and this, really finally funds the Safe Routes to School program. And then secure bicycle storage pilot. I put these on here because there are a lot of bills that didn't move, more than I even have listed here. And I think these two are important though, because it does focus on that reducing VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, which is of course the thing we should be always focusing on first. And we tend to forget about how important that is. But similar to energy efficiency, that reducing VMT, building better connected neighborhoods and systems and transit, and different modes of transportation like cycling, those are like huge ways that we can decarbonize the transportation sector that don't mean transitioning every single car on the road to an electric vehicle. And then SB 1024, this establishes working groups to look at emissions in aviation and how to tackle that. So it looks at intra-island and trans-Pacific transportation. And then it also establishes some clean transportation goals that kind of mimic some of the goals that were all established in 2021. So it's not brand new, but it does include aviation and shipping and not just ground transportation. So that part is new. And then some of or all of the bills are relating to EVs, EV rebates, EV charging, failed some earlier on and some at the last minute. I'll just highlight this first one on this list. Maybe that one made it the furthest. This was some funding for, the idea of this was that we should be building out electric vehicle charging in workplaces. We want to incentivize people being able to charge electric vehicles during the day when there's most ample renewable energy on the grid. It also helps shift that peak load and balance out the grid. So there's a lot of reasons why daytime charging is positive. And then it also has the benefits of adding charging options for people who might not be able to charge at home, maybe giving people who hadn't thought they could buy an EV an option to buy an EV. And then it was also that aspect of having the state lead by example by transitioning state facilities instead of doing a mandate for private sector. So again, all of the things on this list, that bill, incentives for, there's a typo on this. The second bill on that list, it should say incentives for EV charging in affordable housing development. That was a bill that failed that we'll come back to. And then direct rebates for purchase are something we can continue to talk about, as well as looking at rental fleet transition and other private fleet transition as well. If there's programs we can put in place to help facilitate that moving forward more quickly. Next slide. And so even though a lot of bills failed, there were a number of things that happened through the budget that were positive. We got a ceiling increase implemented for the PUC special fund. So this will allow both the electric vehicle charging system rebate and the hydrogen fueling system rebates that were established to have access to their barrel tax funding that was allocated towards them. So instead of having to come back to the legislature every year for an appropriation, the ceiling increase means they'll be able to spend on that funding that's earmarked specifically for those programs without kind of having to ask permission. So that's a really positive step forward. The Carbon Smart Land Management Fund, probably Senator Gabbard talked about this. It was established by one of his bills last year but didn't get enough funding. And then this year, 1 million was put in the budget to fund that. The Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, the GEMS program, this was a House Majority Caucus package measure to fund that program, to enable them to provide, low interest loans and financing to ALICE families, so low and moderate income families, to be able to install rooftop solar and storage. So this is similar to what they already do, but this source of funding would be a, free and clear of the PUC, so they'll be able to deploy it with a lot less bureaucracy. This was one of the things targeted by the governor's line item vetoes in the budget to reduce it by half to 50 million, which I think is still, 100 is better, but 50 is still really positive. So we'll just have to see what happens with that. And I think the thing for people to remember with this funding, it's not 100 million that gets spent down and then it's gone. It capitalizes the fund, so it will enable them to continue to give out loans, and it will be self-sustaining for a really long time with that amount of funding. There was also hydrogen hub funding. This was actually in House Bill 28, not in the budget, but this put in like the state match. If the hydrogen hub application is awarded to the state, then this would be the state matching fund amount. And then the budget also included $500,000 for the CBM program, $800,000 for Waikiki phase 2 of their adaptation and resilience plan, and then kind of $194 million divided over various programs for natural resources and DLNR, plus additional NCIP funds. So it was really a bumper year in the budget for DLNR funding for a lot of natural resource protection programs and positions. Next slide. And then finally, we also did have some success passing resolutions. First off I have listed here HCR 192. And this is actually directing the Climate Commission to engage in kind of public education about the human health impacts of climate change. And there's a lot of interest. If you look up that resolution and read through it, there's a lot of interesting and eye-opening information in there. Also links to an informational briefing that we had prior to the 2023 legislation about the human health impacts of climate change. And I think this is something that hasn't been focused on as much as, the things that we think of like sea level rise and air quality and things like that. So I think that people deserve to be educated about it, and that also might help kind of maybe shake loose some additional action on climate change as people understand those impacts. And then the House passed House Resolution 125, so just the House. The concurrent reso didn't pass the Senate, but to support national carbon pricing. So this was sending a resolution, a message to the federal government and to our congressional delegation saying the Hawaii State House supports a national level carbon tax. We passed the House resolution addressing, urging state agencies to be aware of and take advantage of the direct pay option in the Inflation Reduction Act. So there is a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act that would pay nonprofits that cannot access the tax credits, that includes state and county governments, for example, to be able to just be reimbursed directly 30% of the cost of projects. So things, again, like renewable energy systems, whether that's solar systems, battery, etc. And we passed the concurrent resolution, 2 concurrent resolutions, one expressing support for the state's hydrogen hub application, and then another urging permanent presence for Department of Energy in Hawaii. And next slide. So this, I think, is my second to last slide. I'm almost done. So these are just some other climate mitigation bills that got close but didn't make it that we will definitely be coming back to next year. One was establishing a hydrofluorocarbon management program within the Department of Health. This would help the state and entities in the state have big refrigeration systems to comply with the coming federal regulations, phasing out hydrofluorocarbons, which are really high global warming potential greenhouse gas, and really kind of put us at the forefront of being able to comply with those regulations. the solar permitting reform bill, this would have, just to help to clear out that backlog and all the delays in the permitting system by expediting the residential rooftop systems. And it would have also potentially created a more expedited pathway for small commercial systems. And then we also had bills that failed, including things that would have, reformed the interconnection process to make that faster, social cost of carbon and carbon tax, which are kind of two sides of the same coin, looking at putting some kind of price on carbon to account for it in our decision making. And then last slide. And then just throwing on here some of the other measures that did not pass that are maybe less directly related to climate change. Actually, the social vulnerability to climate change assessment, which is something that Leo worked on with the Climate Commission, probably should have be at the top of the list because that is the most sort of directly climate related. But the green fees bill didn't pass. We had a phasing out additional products with PFAS like cosmetics and all food serviceware and food packaging. Bills related to kind of having a more circular waste management system, extended producer responsibility and phasing out single-use plastics. Many bills about the cesspool issue, water efficiency, and then this is kind of maybe not everyone on the commission agrees about Department of Environment, but I personally think that given the way that addressing climate change is sort of split up between too many state agencies sometimes, and given how urgent that issue is right now, that I think establishing a Department of Environment is something that would be timely in the state. And these are all measures that did not move this year. Some of them got close. And that is the end of my presentation. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Lowen. Members, are there any questions for our presenter? Okay. Members of the public, any comments on this presentation? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go on to the next portion of item 3, which is asking the commissioners if they have any legislative updates or bills that they might be considering for the upcoming session. So members, updates that you might want to share at this time on legislation? Yes.
Aloha, it's Don Chang, Chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. I think as Senator Lowen said, DLNR this year did receive, I think there was a recognition of that historically DLNR is not, we've been underfunded, lack of capacity to address many of the issues. So appreciate Representative Lowen's leadership in the House, Speaker Nadine Nakamura, and the members in the Senate side who have been very supportive. So we did get funds for a lot of forestry, DOFA, DAR, really to sort of improve our watershed management programs, fire prevention, also inside our nearshore waters, coral mitigation, really looking at developing more coral resiliency in our nearshore waters. We also got funds for state parks to help them with managing those resources, which will probably be overtapped as the visitor industry increases. But we think that we've got a better handle on managing those resources. On the other hand, we did get a major cut. We got cut about $82 million from our budget, which is a substantial sum. So we're going to do the best that we can with what we've got. But again, we've greatly appreciated the support of especially the House during this legislative session.
Thank you. Other members with updates, Department of Agriculture, any updates?
We didn't have 80 million to cut. But they did cut the 5 million for the fill in. So nope, nothing like that.
Okay. Any other updates from members?
I
have some updates from the Department of Health, though they're not legislative. Should I save them for
No,
later? Or?
Maybe want to move to item
No,
4?
save them for later because that's a different agenda item. Thank you very much. Okay, any comments from members of the public that on this particular agenda item?
This being
Yes. go
future
ahead.
legislative items, is that the agenda item?
Yes.
Ben Sullivan, I'm the Deputy Director for the City and County's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. I want to thank Representative Lowen for her hard work on HB 1252, which is a bill that was intended to help low and moderate income households receive a larger share of the EV charger credits that are available. And I just wanted to emphasize that we are going to continue to support that. We did support it this session. We think it's a very important bill, even though it's just a small change to a rebate program, because it really identifies with what we think is a critical principle, which is the principle of targeted universalism and use with equity, saying, hey, we have limited resources to help everyone in our community to take climate action and to mitigate their emissions. So we should focus those resources first on those who have the least amount of money, the least available resources, and then worry about how everyone else comes along. So I just wanted to add that, and again, thank Representative Lowen and say, hey, we're not giving up and we appreciate the effort.
Thank you, Ben. I've never.
Thank you, and thanks to John as well. Sorry, I was on mute before, but thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Representative Lowen. Ben, I've never heard the term targeted universalism. Can you did kind of explain what that was, but.
Sure, I'm happy to,
Okay.
if appropriate.
Yes.
Sure, so I'm not by no means an expert on the term, but my understanding is that very often when we take policy approaches to things, we assume by making them available to everyone that everyone has equal access. And the concept of targeted universalism recognizes that equity does not equal equality. So a good example is the solar tax credit as it stands today. We all know by the data that folks with more money claim the solar tax credit and or claim a larger portion of the solar tax credit. And it certainly could be said that we want everyone to have solar on the rooftops to the extent possible, especially here on Oahu with limited land. But maybe the folks who need it most are the folks who make less money, and we have to think about how to get it to them more effectively. And so that's an example of if we were to target the solar tax credit to make it more accessible, whether it would be through direct rebates or through additional assistance, that would be a targeted universalist approach where we're starting with the folks who need the help most and then kind of letting the rest of the market come along.
Thank you. That definitely helps me. I think Vida's GEMS program also has that focus as well. Thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, aloha. Thank you, Co-Chair. I just thought I would add a comment to one of the agenda items that Representative Lowen mentioned. She talked about the line item veto, the important measure, the $100 million that would go to the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority. And I agree that, yeah, $50 million is certainly much better than nothing. And, we can be very effective about it. But I thought I'd also just make everyone aware that we did make a $120 million grant request to the Department of Energy under the GRIP program, Grid Improvement Program, for low to moderate income, essentially opportunities for low and moderate income customers behind the meter to get support through distributed energy resources and storage in concert with Enphase, which is an inverter manufacturer and installer. And that actually, the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority was a part of that grant request and had was part of a $70 million cost share on our end. So that will affect that cost share and may adjust or may impact our ability to get that grant. Although we are working on kind of a workaround, but I just wanted to kind of make everyone aware that it could have broader implications. So we're watching that pretty closely and trying to come up with an adequate workaround.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for adding more information about the GEMS program, since it is one of our ways to do targeted universalism. Others who may want to comment or add to the conversation? Okay, so let's move on to item number 4, which is commissioner member updates. And so I'm going to ask each commissioner to share any updates that you have. And this, Dr. Felton, this would not be legislative. It would be just anything that you might want to say. Would you like to lead off?
Sure, happy
Great.
to. Thanks, I'm Diana Felton, Hawaii Department of Health here on behalf of Dr. Singh, our director. And I want to thank Representative Lowen for sort of kicking off the topic I wanted to discuss a little bit, and that's this issue of climate change and health effects. And we have at the Department of Health been slowly but consistently working on a larger scale effort to really uplift the conversation about climate change and health. And really the idea behind that is that we talk a lot here, both in this commission, statewide, about the environmental impacts of climate change, the infrastructure impacts, the planning, sea level rise, but we have not consistently been talking about the death and illness that's going to be coming from these climate change impacts as well. And that's become sort of my own personal mission over the past couple of years, is to really try to expand our understanding of our health vulnerabilities due to climate change, and also start thinking about adaptation policies so we can prevent the morbidity and the mortality. So to that effort, it's been a slow start. It's so far been no one's job to do this at the Department of Health, but a number of us are working pretty hard, and I just wanted to give some updates because we're starting to make some real progress. So thanks to Representative Lowen for hosting us, having that briefing last December to the EEP committee. If you're bored at any time and want to be quite scared about your future health, take a look at that briefing. But then we've made some other progress as well. We do have a pending official climate and health coordinator position approved for the Department of Health that was approved in 2022. For those of you who work in state government, you know how long that takes to get a new position established. So we're still in the process of that. But in the meantime, we've been able to fill a temporary position with a quite qualified candidate who's been in the position about 2 months and really started some of this work. And the work that started so far is just amazing. Just this week, we had our first meeting of a statewide climate and health Hui, really trying to get public health and practitioners and health practitioners together to start talking about these issues. Many people are working on them in small bits in their own little groups, and we're really trying to get more of a collaboration together. So we've started that group. If anyone's interested in joining, we'll take people of all types, as we're really trying to keep it focused on health. And of course, equity is very much a part of that conversation as well. The goals of that collaboration is to really break down silos, collaborate on both research and interpretation of research, and to promote adaptation actions that will reduce the morbidity and mortality for climate change. We've started an overall climate and health vulnerability assessment for Hawaii. That's based on the CDC's BRACE format. BRACE is the CDC's federal funding for climate and health programs within departments of health. They only fund 16 programs across the country, but they have made their processes available publicly. So while we don't have funding, we are starting to follow some of their framework and start to develop really an assessment to look at where are our biggest vulnerabilities as far as health in Hawaii, what data is available, and what data we need to go out and get. And part of that discussion about data that we need to go out and get is the third thing we're working on, which is a study this summer gathering data looking at heat-related illness and temperatures in Hawaii. So, I think in many cases, we think maybe heat is not such an issue in Hawaii. We don't get 116 degrees in Hawaii. We don't get these huge temperatures. But if you combine heat, humidity, lack of trade winds, we start to create conditions in where heat really can impact people, particularly those working outside, people without air conditioning, people living in, low ventilation settings, children playing outside, sports, things like that. We don't have any data in Hawaii. So that's part of this project this summer, is to collect data through our Department of Health Surveillance Syndrome, which collects data from hospitals and clinics, and looking at heat-related illness. And then we'll compare it with temperatures, wet bulb index, trade winds, et cetera, and hopefully provide some data depending on what we find, that may spur some suggestions on policy. Do we need to be thinking about official cooling centers in Hawaii? Do we need to be thinking about a state cooling officer or heat officer that can make some of these assessments? So that's sort of overview climate and health program, sort of just getting started at the Department of Health, but more to come in that arena as we progress. And then I have some updates as well from our Clean Air branch on sort of the mitigation side. They've been working really closely with Leah and the team on the climate pollution reduction grant. So hoping to continue to help identify decarbonization actions in various sectors. And then they are happy to report that in conjunction with the University of Hawaii, they completed the first of the 3 annual greenhouse gas emission inventory reports. So the first one, let's see. So those reports include the greenhouse gas emissions for 2005, 2018, and 2019 as the inventory years, and then we'll update the existing inventory years as well. And I have some links for where the reports are available, and they've started on the new inventories for 2020 and 2021 as well. So that is all my updates, and happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions for Dr. Felton? Seeing none, members of the public comments on this update. Any that I can? I know.
Ben.
What's that?
Ben.
Ben, go ahead.
Thank you. Do you have a timeline on the 2020, 2021 updates by chance?
For the greenhouse gases inventory report,
Yes.
let's see. Scheduled to be complete in March of 2024.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, thank you. First, I'm going to start off by apologizing to Chair Chang. I didn't mean to minimize your losses. They were pretty tremendous. Yeah, we were in that meeting. So that being said, tagging on to what Department of Health said, an update is that we also had a bill going through for heat stress on animals, right? For how they're impacted during transport or just how it's affecting them with climate change effects. So that is something that didn't pass, but we'll come back and try again. There is a grant out there right now. It's called the Powering Affordable Clean Energy, acronym for PACE. It's quite a wonderful grant with, I will admit, it's a little complicated. We're seeking the assistance of Gwen Yamamoto from High Energy. She's a genius, lover, isn't she? Woohoo!
Yeah.
But she's very busy on her own grant, so she's kind of advising us. The basic idea is that the government gives you some funding. You apply for it. We're thinking that we'll apply for it, but it would be the energy companies that would have the money to loan out to big entities. I'm thinking because it's ag like a food hub. You loan it out to the food hub. They build solar and they build more solar than they need. But then they sell it back to the HECO and HECO then gives them a credit on their bill, but they also give credit to the farmers that supply them.
Wow.
Isn't that a great idea?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very complicated. But that was it in a nutshell. And what we have, our grants administrator is Matthew Loke. He's working with Gwen, and we're going to figure this thing out because the max you can apply for state is $100 million. Whoa. I know. Try to cut that.
You got to get it first.
I know. And so that's why we're working with so many people as partners. But Gwen has some ideas, and we'll see what we can do. But not only food hubs, it can be any entity in the state that, like Pacific Gateway, right? You be the one to build solar, and then you leave it out. It's a really good plan. It's just devil in the details done. And that's about it for us.
Okay. Members, any questions or comments for Chair Bird? If not, members of the public, any questions or comments? Okay. let's move on to DHHL. Katie, do you have an update for us?
Hi, yeah, so DHHL, of course, can you hear me? Sorry. So DHHL does have a lot of long-term types of issues that they've been working on, right? When it comes to sustainability, of course, focused on our homesteads, those, especially the older ones, Molokai in particular, right? We do have homesteads right along the shoreline. So there has been efforts to create a shoreline erosion management plan, which our Hawaiian Homes Commission did approve in 2022. So that's just one example and one community that DHHL is trying to kind of make sure that there is a strategic approach of recognition and awareness that these are issues that are climate issues are definitely going to impact our beneficiaries, our homesteads, and to try to address them in the upcoming years. So of course, there's a lot of initiatives that have been, long standing and continue to go on as we try to evaluate and continue to plan. In addition to that, this particular new administration is very interested in making sure that we assess our possible renewable energy type of opportunities. So we did receive a $500,000 appropriation, I think in not this legislative session, and I think it was last legislative session, to investigate geothermal sources on the Big Island. And that's just a beginning, right? So there definitely is an expression to try to pursue those types of opportunities as well. There's a lot of basically our planning office, which has, I believe Nancy McPherson is DHHL staff that's also on this call. They've been doing an amazing job of just understanding our lands and our needs when it comes to risk assessment and mitigation where necessary, and just trying to continue to inform our beneficiaries and our commission of all of the efforts that the department is taking with regards to climate change issues, and then addressing those, trying to formulate strategies to mitigate.
Thank you, Katie. Members, any questions for Katie on her update? Members of the public, any comments or questions on DHHL's update? If not, we'll move on to the City and County Department of DPP. Noelle Cole, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
Hi,
good.
so just wanted to introduce myself. I was literally appointed designee 2 days ago, so I have a pretty bare bones update for you. But I'm the branch chief for policy planning and planning division. And so the first one I wanted to touch upon is that our city One Water panel, which is comprised of 8 agencies that touch upon water management, planning, or infrastructure, was given a significant award by City Council to develop a guiding document. And this will basically tee up CIP projects, including design and planning and phasing, and provide the blueprint moving forward for the One Water panel group. So that's very exciting, good news. The other funding that may be of interest, DPP was awarded $400,000 for the Waikiki Area Adaptation Plan. So this is separate from what the city is pursuing, but it is something that could be very complementary. The DPP plan is looking specifically at near-term adaptation. We're looking at it through the One Water lens, looking to knock down some low-hanging fruit there and create pathways for coordination on infrastructure. And that again could be picked up with this larger award in the One Water plan moving forward. And it's also, you know, walking the line between an adaptation and a community plan. So that's also going to be looking at the special design district guidelines, looking at heights and views and all of that good stuff as well. And then finally, I wanted to mention Bill 4 CD1. So that includes various measures that are intended to help buildings have low energy costs, improve grid stability, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that has passed the second reading, and it was actually supposed to be heard again yesterday, but the committee was canceled. So that has not yet been rescheduled, and I'll update that again next time. And I see that Ben is there, so from CCSR, and I don't know if you would like to give any updates as well.
Just
Put
real
in my
quick,
box,
sorry,
but my
real
box is
quick,
4148. Rip Lowen, you're on speaker.
Representative Lowen, if you could mute your microphone, then we won't have a sound conflict.
Thank you.
Noel, thank you so much. And I've had the pleasure of working with Noel on in discussions on how to coordinate with DPP's initiatives. Ben, do you want to give an update on the Office of Climate Change, Resilience, and no, tell me what it is.
CCSR, Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency.
Resilience. Yes.
Try to fit it all in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No need for an update in that. I think Leah had intended that I would maybe perhaps give an update with the CPERG agenda item, but really just do appreciate the really great collaboration with DPP on Bill 4. And she didn't even mention the amazing work they're doing with the solar task force, because Rep. Lowen talked about permitting as a general concept. And I'll tell you, if you speak to the solar industry right now about the progress the city is making on rooftop solar in terms of permitting expedition, it's tremendous. So that's a big highlight that I think that people should hear about.
Great.
And that's all DPP. They're great.
Thanks for that.
Great leadership.
Let's go back to DOT. Melissa, are you here?
I'm here. Sorry, no update from DOT.
Okay. Let's move on. Is there, I'm afraid I didn't keep track before. Director Kern from County of Hawaii, you have an update for us? You just had a conference, didn't you? A sustainability conference?
We did a while back, but I do have an update. I have a really pointed update, which we're really excited about.
Oh, you froze.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we have a very exciting update. As you know, we've been working on our climate action plan. Our climate action plan draft is, I'd say it's part 1 of our climate action plan, which is very county focused and facing to start with. And it's kind of that two-way street that we want to really implement, starting with getting our house in order and then pushing it back out to the general public and our community as a whole with bringing in other climate actions and requirements. We have the draft complete. This has been a joint effort with research and development and the planning department. The draft has been completed. It's been out for public review. Public review has closed. We are finalizing a few adjustments and we'll be taking it to the county council next month to be adopted by resolution. It has been quite a while in the works and we're very excited to have that coming out. I have other things I could talk about, but that's really the big one. I'd just like to celebrate that.
We'll celebrate with you. Any comments or questions from the members for Director Kern? Any comments or questions from members of the public for Hawaii County's Planning Director? Okay, let's see. Did we? DBED. Mark Glick, the Chief Hawaii State Chief Energy Officer representing DBED. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Mark.
I must have muted myself. Sorry about that. I want to take this opportunity to make a kind of an exciting introduction to our new deputy at the Hawaii State Energy Office, Stephen Walls. Stephen's on the call here. He comes to us most recently from the Natural Resources Defense Council, where he was really a primary decarbonization advocate. But before that, he was a congressional affairs specialist at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And before that, he was at the Department of Energy, where he worked directly with the Secretary's office, as well as he's one of the creators of the Energy Transition Initiative nationwide. So I guess at this point, just like to allow Stephen to introduce himself.
Nice to meet everyone, and thank you for the kind introduction, Mark. It's good to see a couple familiar faces, Ben. Hopefully we get the chance to catch up soon. I'm really excited to be here and contribute to the work in fighting climate change and helping on the renewable energy and energy efficiency side and sustainability writ large, as well as advanced transportation and alternative fuels and electric mobility and all this really cool stuff that there's federal resources for. And hopefully my experience in DC will be helpful to the State Energy Office, but all of you around the room and on the phone in helping access and use those resources. So really glad to be here, and thanks again for the chance to introduce myself. Hope to work with you all soon.
Terrific. Thank you, Stephen. And welcome to DVET. Delighted to meet you online. Okay. Yeah, who else we got?
Well, we just had Commissioner Cooper join us from Maui.
Oh, terrific. Okay, so first of all, introduce yourself, and then second of all, you get to give an update for the County of Maui on climate change mitigation and adaptation initiatives or policies.
Sure. Might be jumping in there. Aloha, kako. I'm Joshua Cooper. I'm with Office of Innovation and Sustainability. It's a new office created by Mayor Bisson, and I'm heading that. And as far as working on those aspects, we just put our climate action resiliency plan up for public comment. It has 1 month, and then we're going to reconvene the two main bodies that it coordinated, but add in some new members. We inherited that document. It was available on December 15th. But what we hope to do is to spend more time to coordinate and meet with the committees as well of the county council, which we also had a first 2-hour session with, to talk about how we could focus really on action and implementation, and where each one of the pieces of the climate action resiliency plan would be then implemented. So working on that. The other aspect is we're working a great deal. I just came from Maui Conservation Alliance, and we're working on our Maui Malama Maui Million Native Tree project that we're doing, and we're aiming for that between now and 2026. We also have our Maui Mayor Millennium Fellows with up to 17 that will be focusing on one of the UN global goals. So they share with us what they're doing or what they want to accomplish and which of the goals they're aiming to and what actions they have. And then we assist them through our 2-month period to move towards actualizing each one of those articles of the 2030 agenda. We also are involved to prepare for the voluntary local review, which will take place in New York between the 17th through the 19th. We've been partnering with Rapa Nui as well as with civil society and the mayors in Fiji to do voluntary local reviews from a Pacific Island perspective. So Maui with Rapa Nui, we had our preliminary meeting at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And that was the first exchange between the mayor of Maui and the mayor of Rapa Nui. And we're working together on implementing the 2030 agenda from a Pacific Island perspective, working on that and working with a local 2030 hub in Hawaii Green Grove. And a couple more things I could share, but we're pacing out between the July deadline and then the September Sustainable Development Goal Summit that'll take place but every day is a full day. And we're so excited to know when these meetings are. And I know it's our first time we're here, so we try to prioritize. I can only apologize for Hawaiian. We did every step to be able to be at 2 meetings plus a hearing today, but then still didn't take off on time. But thanks to all the forces able to be here for this prime. It's an honor to be here. We look forward to partnering much more closely. And Mayor Bisson is right now down at the Sandbox, where they're doing a pauhana that'll happen after 5 o'clock. So we're hoping to go from here to there and working with the other mayors in that capacity. But it's really an honor to be here and look forward to seeing new ways. And of course, we began the conversation a year ago at the COP before we were in these positions. But it's exciting to be able to see what's possible. Mahalo.
Wow, welcome on board.
Thank you.
I'll echo that, wow. To walk into the room after getting off a delayed flight and suddenly give a very comprehensive update, we really appreciate that.
No, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Members, any questions for Joshua? I don't see any members of the public, any comments or questions for the County of Maui's initiatives? Okay, well, we're delighted you're here. And we will be seeing you at our next meetings. Thank you.
I will just probably sleep over the night before. Provided we don't have some hearing on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, anybody else?
Just you and co-chair.
Okay. Well, mine is probably the smaller. Okay, the Office of Planning is a small office, but very committed to climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And we've been very fortunate to get help from the legislature in looking at a framework for managed retreat policies. We are initiating that project next month. And it's not, I have to give a little bit of nuance here. It's actually, it's not a, the contract is not to promote managed retreat. It's to look at it from an analytical perspective and see where it might be appropriate, where it might not be appropriate, and what all the variables are that policymakers need to be aware of when they are considering that as one of the choices in their toolbox to deal with sea level rise and, of course, hurricane and tsunami damage. So we'll be able to make a report on that next year. We also got this is a legislative update. We got funding, thank you, Representative Lowen and Senator Gabbard, to fund the counties, add to the funding that we provide, federal funding we provide for the Coastal Zone Management Program. The counties implement the state's Coastal Zone Management chapter in terms of the shoreline management permits. And so that's chapter 205A. And we're just terrifically grateful to the legislature for being able to give them a little bump up on that. We also got some funding for the Waikiki sea level rise study that we've been doing for the legislature, and we'll be doing a phase 2 on that. And we will also be doing a phase 2 on our state facilities sea level rise adaptation study, which will help analyze the various risk assessment tools that are being used around the country to determine how to prioritize risk and adaptations that need to be taken, so that as the legislature is presented with all of our needs for adapting our facilities that are at risk of sea level rise and groundwater intrusion, that they can look at that and determine what the first priorities are, second priorities, etc. So that also will be done next. So I turn this over to my co-chair.
what I have to report isn't nearly as exciting as what I'm hearing everybody else do. But just a few things. Our Commission on Water Resource Management has made or will be making an announcement. We are going to be facing, this is going to be a very dry season, so extreme drought. So everybody's on notice to start doing conservation measures, water conservation measures. I think since our last meeting, we had some discussions, and this is kind of a collaboration with DOT on a DERPA. This is a U.S. Department of Defense coral mitigation measure. And it's actually quite exciting. They've awarded, Hawaii is one of 2 awardees to do some coral mitigation or mitigations for sea level rise. So DOT is partnering up with DLNR and UHIMB on doing this $25 million coral mitigation, where they are looking at creating some like artificial reefs to deflect the impact of wave actions on the near shore. So clearly our Department of Transportation all along, in particular along Honolulu, Kualoa, those areas are just falling into the ocean. So the alternative to these large shoreline erosion protective measures, we're hoping that we can, what they're hoping to do is replicate some coral, I guess I want to say artificial reefs to actually deflect the wave deflection. So I think it's a two-year study, but they're already in the process of developing that, but we're partnering with DOT on that project. And the last thing is, climate change is inevitable. It is here. So sort of as Dr. Felton sort of going full circle, we're really into looking at collection of data. So having our Division of Forestry and Wildlife, Division of Aquatic Resources, it is how do we quantify the impacts of climate change on our nearshore water streams and forest reserves. So it's looking at getting some really good measurements, some tools to measure whether they're partnering up with USGS on stream gauges, looking at working with NOAA on nearshore waters, putting in some water quality measures, as well as also up in our forest reserve. So we are trying to look at gathering some good data to quantify the impacts of climate change on what are future impacts that we just cannot even begin to imagine today. So we're just looking at different tools to measure the impacts, and then how do we quantify that to make better informed decisions. So that's kind of, we're not as exciting as many of you guys are doing. I wouldn't even ask Michael to give a presentation because Michael's working. He's on OCCL. They're the regulators.
We're regulators.
Yes.
And witnesses.
And witnesses. And so, but I think Department of Land and Natural Resources is really challenged by, we have so many different divisions that we all are looking at the impacts of climate change more on what you can see, but we're looking at more the impacts of human activity on human activity as well as climate change, coral bleaching. So looking at gathering really good data now so that we can begin to see trends, make better decisions.
Actually, if I can add one
Yes,
thing.
please.
One of the critical issues we're facing right now is the impact of sea level rise on our highways. And that's like immediate, like as of yesterday, particularly on the Windward Coast and other areas on Oahu. I'm always a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of realigning the highways. And Kauai also has issues, Wailua area and some of the smaller roads. So we've been working with DOT. Some of the hard choices the state is going to have to make is that there are not going to be good solutions. We can protect the highway, damage the beach. We can protect the beach and lose the highway. There's not a lot of middle ground. So Morris, I didn't know you're at DOT. We should be talking. We've been working with Ed and yeah. So I just wanted to add that, like, we have some hard choices as a state. This is just the first of many to come. Thank you.
So I'm hoping that that coral mitigation through the DERPA funds will be another tool that we can look at rather than hardening the shoreline, looking at creating something more out in the nearshore waters to deflect that, especially to protect our highways, because that without them, that's access and that's connection. So looking at tools that are much more sort of, I won't say consistent, but lower impacts, like the beach hardenings. Because also our mission is keeping those beaches open to the public. So not wanting to compromise that. But yeah, I think with this collective energy and opportunities to look at different solutions, that we are, or at least we're in a better position to address them.
That sounds like a perfect case. Chair, you know, with that money, you might want to look into the Reef One runway being renamed the Seaplane Taxiway. The Reef Runway on PKI, right?
I know,
Honolulu International.
yeah,
It
yes,
is
yes.
so, it's already flat with the sea.
I
You
know, yeah,
It's gonna be a tough one.
Okay,
okay, thank you.
all right. So, Leah, are we ready to move on to?
Any questions for you or Chair?
Yeah, any questions for Co-Chair Chang? Seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, and that's item 5, and it's a presentation on climate pollution reduction application. Leah, I'm going to ask you to introduce this one. Go ahead.
Yep. Aloha, mahalo. It will be me speaking. Lucky you all. Leah Laramie, I'm the Hawaii State Climate Coordinator. Just wanted to share with you folks, if you recall at the last meeting, you folks all agreed that the Climate Commission staff, myself, would take on the climate pollution reduction grant, coordination between us, all of your agencies, departments, and the community. So just wanted to give you an update on the status of that. We have the draft team, which was myself, and we also had some great students from Harvard and MIT doing a graduate class, which their project was to help us draft our work plan. And we also had climate strategies help us at the beginning phases of that. So that's really how we're able to put together a work plan. And on top of that, we had a great review team consisting of all of you folks, the Compost Hui, Recycle Hawaii, Citizens Climate Lobby, all who contributed towards the work plan and helped to guide the direction of this effort. So we submitted the application April 28th, and with a few minor tweaks, EPA Region 9 gave us the thumbs up on May 30th. We're still waiting on the official award letter, but as of now, we're able to move forward with different agreements and work plans and get everything lined up and ready to go. So the request was for $3 million, which is the allocation that was given to each state and territory. And within that request was funding for 5 positions. So the work plan identified 2 priority actions. One is the Priority Climate Action Plan. And this is really a key component because it's a roadmap to access the $4.6 billion pot of money that is available for climate implementation. So it's really looking at mitigation, specifically, not adaptation per se, but by producing this Priority Climate Action Plan, we'll be able to access that pot of money. And then later comes the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is a little bit more community focused and looking really in the nitty gritty and the details for identifying the steps needed to, reach our climate goals. So they're mitigation plans. I'd mentioned those positions. Just want to give a quick highlight on the positions as we envision them at this moment. So we'll have a program specialist, who will really help to oversee this program and help continue to move it forward. An environmental justice data specialist who will help us to look at, well, later on we'll be hearing about the environmental justice work that's happening in the state. So this person will really help to carry that forward. And look at not only environmental justice in the state, but the important federal guidelines and how we can address that. We have a grant specialist who is going to help us access that $4.6 billion funding, help to coordinate applications between entities who want to do similar actions so that we can really make sure that we're maximizing and not competing against each other, but really making sure that we take advantage of this as much as possible. And then we'll have 2 outreach specialists, one on Maui County and one who's going to be like an outreach supervisor and also focus on the county of Hawai'i. So the outreach for this, we have launched our website. So for more information, I'm gonna see if this will work. It's just on our climate.hawaii.gov website. I think I'll have to do a new share, but it was created by our wonderful Vista Dante here. And the website is, just really giving a broad overview on what the plans are, where we're at, where the funding comes from, because I'm sure that's going to be a question for a lot of people. The timeline, where we're at, where we're going, a little bit more details into the plans and identifying the different mitigation strategies. So if you're interested, we'll definitely be sending that link out to folks. So just back to the presentation. And so just so we can understand the outreach process. I know I only mentioned the Kauai outreach. The outreach supervisor will be conducting the Kauai outreach in conjunction with the County of Kauai. And will also be supervising the Maui Nui outreach specialist, which will be hired through this grant. But they'll also be coordinating with Hawaii County, who is going to be receiving a sub-grant from this grant opportunity to hire their own outreach specialists, but will all be coordinated. And also the city and county of Honolulu were awarded their own $1 million pot of funding for this. So they'll be conducting their outreach and we'll be coordinating with them as well. So we're not ignoring half the state, we're just, it's all working in different ways. And yeah, this is again, a coordinated effort across the state. We really wanna make sure that there's a high level of community engagement. We wanna go to where people gather. We wanna make sure that we're really engaging with our Kanaka Maoli communities and our underserved communities. And we're also forming some technical working groups, which I'll talk about now. Sorry for the bright orange. It seemed vibrant at the time, but a little bit hard to read from here. So our technical working groups are really getting down to the nitty-gritty of the actions that we can take to decarbonize our state, any of the barriers that we might face, and looking at, how we can look at workforce and how we can build that up and what funding is needed to implement these actions. So we have, working groups in transportation, looking specifically at marine transportation, looking at, several different areas in both ground and aviation transportation, looking at electricity, looking at waste, looking at agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, and then IPPU, which I always forget what it stands for, but it's, it's industry type of emissions and things like that.
What's the IPPU stand for?
That's what I just said. I don't remember what it stands for.
She said industry, some.
Industry.
Industrial processes and product use.
Yep. Say that again, Mother.
Industrial processes and product use.
Yep, there we go. Thank you, Kira. And then this banner at the top here are all the different things that these groups will really be looking at. You know, how does marine transportation impact tourism? How does materials management impact? You know, how do the military impact our materials management? Community outreach, youth, environmental justice, long-term carbon sequestration, our workforce. Any barriers we have to implementing these actions, you know, it's going to be really key in identifying how we can continue to move forward, is identifying those barriers first. And then of course the co-benefits, because we know that there's a lot of steps that we can take that, you know, mitigate climate change, but they might also adapt to climate change. So we might have some actions that, you know, we weigh a little bit as a priority because it does multiple things. This is the review structure. The technical working groups will be identifying different actions. The review team, which, you know, includes staff of all of the commission members and some community agencies, will then review what the technical working groups have identified, help to organize that. You know, I'm sure there's going to be overlap because we're very kind of siloed in this. We want to make sure that we then take the step to, you know, cross over and see where we can mix and match. And then it will come to the commission for review, and then back to the EPA. And we'll also have be hiring a contractor to help with this process and program specialists that will help to oversee this whole thing. So they'll be kind of tied into this whole process. So
nice graphics.
You folks may be familiar that this is not the only initiative that's going on right now. We also have the state decarbonization strategy, and the city and county is also producing a priority climate action plan. So this is just helping us to look at how these fit in together. The decarbonization strategy is due in December of this year. Its jurisdiction is just looking at state actions, and it's not eligible. That plan won't allow actions to be eligible for that $4.6 billion. Whereas the city and county at the bottom here is due March of next year, looking just at city and county of Honolulu, and they will be eligible for that pot of funding. And then the state PCAP is kind of going to be a hybrid of these two. We're going to be working both closely with city and county and the Energy Office decarbonization strategy, including both states and counties, and will be eligible for that funding. So really, we're going to be taking what the decarbonization strategy is doing, incorporating that into our PCAP so that all of our actions are eligible. And then I'm going to hand it over to Monique to talk a little bit more on the decarbonization strategy.
Thank you, Leah. Hi, everyone. My name is Monique Schaefer. I'm with the Hawaii State Energy Office, and I just started in a new role as Decarbonization Program Manager. So I will be leading the efforts of the state's decarb strategy, which was tasked to HSEO really to analyze the different pathways to really reach the deep decarbonization goals that we have for us established pursuant of the 225P-5. That was passed in 2022, and we have been, really working with different agencies and coordinating lockstep with Leah, and really grateful to be able to coordinate because we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's been spinning for a long time. It's just finally time to really get it down on paper. So although we're the energy office, we are looking at all sectors of the economy and developing, different options to reach net negative. There's 13 requirements of the Act, and these include both policy and regulatory action, but also more of the project-specific land use and transportation planning measures. Next slide, please. So just to sort of put the framework between the decarb strategy and the PCAP, looking at the requirements of the Priority Climate Action Plan, it really made sense to work together on this and use sort of the decarb strategy as the foundation or the launching off point for the PCAP, because a lot of the requirements are very much the same. So the decarb strategy requires HSEO to evaluate each of the different carbon sources. And I think we're going to try and go beyond what the inventory accounts for. And the PCAP requires a greenhouse gas inventory. We're also required to do emissions projections based on the different reduction targets. This is a requirement not of the PCAP, but of the CCAP, or the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is a follow-on to the PCAP for later funding. We are also required to look at measures to reduce emissions in all sectors. And I think that goes nicely with the include near-term implementation, ready priority greenhouse gas reduction measures. And we're also required to look at EJ and frontline communities, ALICE communities, low moderate income communities, and that is reflective of really all IRA or bill funds that require a DEIA or Justice 40 analysis. Next slide, please. Just so updates where we're at the State Energy Office. We chose to contract with E3, Energy and Environmental Economics, because of the existing work they've done for Hawaiian Electric through the integrated grid planning process. It really made sense to sort of bounce off the work and build upon the work that they have done. They also did a similar study for the state of California. I received notice, so we're no longer in the final stages of the encumbrance for contracting. We did get the notice to proceed today. So that's a huge, huge thing if anyone knows procurement. As you all know, procurement at the state. And, you know, because it is cross-sectoral, I think this collaboration, you know, we at the Energy Office, we know energy, but, you know, there's definitely interconnections between sectors. So we've had some great work in collaboration with UH, the Agricultural Resource Center, and the U.S. Climate Alliance, particularly on the natural working lands piece. And then, of course, the CPRG group, you know, Ben's group, as well as Leia's group, just through that sort of coordinated process. We are looking to do outreach, more really targeted outreach, and present the pathways and get feedback on the different analyses we come up with E3, really in the August timeframe, with targeted stakeholder input in June, July. That's it for me. Again, I'll drop my email in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
And before we end, Ben, you want to share what the city and county is doing?
I would be happy to. I just have some brief remarks and no slides, but I thank you for the opportunity to share what we're thinking with regards to CPERG. I'll open again, Ben Sullivan. Only recently, the Deputy Director of the CCSR, really happy to be in that role and working with everyone here so collaboratively. The reflection I have for the group is what a historical moment we're in, and I'm sure you've considered this already with the passage of the IRA. CPERG is another really, you know, great indicator of that, something that was within the Inflation Reduction Act, but you know, we finally got a green light through the entire system saying, not only do we want you to do this, but we're going to help you do it. We're going to fund it. You know, that's always the question we have, right? Okay, great. You want us to do it. Where's the money? The federal government has shown us the money in this case. And so we've got the money to, I can recall, I've been doing this for a long time. I can recall having to fight for years just to get the money to plan for climate action. And then knowing that once we had the plan done, we're going to have to fight for every little thing that we had to do. Here we are with robust funding for planning and a very significant pot of money available for implementation. That is also very flexible. Often the government funding comes through, federal government comes through a program and it says, you got to do this. It's got to go through these people, FHWA, whatever it might be, HUD. In this circumstance, EPA is giving us what appears to be very wide latitude, which allows us to do very unique and very catalytic projects. So super exciting. I'll stop on that. And then I can't continue without saying Leah has really been a champion in terms of getting everyone together. So I hope that the commission has tremendous confidence in her, which I'm sure you already do, but she just has been really great about pulling everyone together and saying, hey, we're doing this. We're going to do it in a coordinated way. It's really important that we do that, so we're not being redundant, and so we're getting the maximum leverage out of this opportunity. So with that, I want to spend a minute talking about how do we all communicate with the public on this, and our perspective. And this is still forming; it's early, right, in the messaging. But our perspective is that, hey, we're going to have a lot of plans, we're going to have a lot of strategies and individual actions that we're going to have to talk about in different working groups and everything. But at the highest level, really, what this is about is, and I'll steal from Kauai's general plan, this is a kako thing, right? We know that we all have to do this. We really need to get the message out that this is not government taking this action alone. This is government asking everyone to come together and do it together. And then back to our term targeted universalism, we feel like the only way to get that public support is to take these resources and not spend them on this abstraction of greenhouse gas reduction, but spend them in parts of our community where people feel better as a result. We help people renovate buildings and make them more efficient. Their life is better. We help people who didn't have a transportation solution to walk across the city because it's now safer. That's reducing emissions, but that's not the top line. The top line is better living. So that's the message we want to bring across, to summarize: prioritize equity, leverage federal funding, and collaborate. The working groups that Leah has set up are really exciting. The technical working groups, I'm going to talk about one and then I'm going to be done because there's so many, but buildings and efficiency is something that we are very, very excited about. We as CCSR work very closely with DPP, who, as you can imagine, has a very wide purview over the built environment. So just to name a few of the things that between us and DPP is exciting. When we think about the built environment, a huge portion of our emissions come from buildings. But it's not just new buildings, it's existing buildings. How do we impact that? So new buildings, right? The energy code, Noel talked about Bill 4, a great chance for us with the energy code that comes down from the state to make sure new buildings are much more efficient than older buildings, and that they actually start putting us in line with these 2045 goals we have. That's a huge task. But we've had a start with Bill 4, working with the industry and trying to make it a much more collaborative process. We're excited to continue that. We're 1 week away moving to existing buildings. We're 1 week away from our reporting deadline on building benchmarking, which is something we passed last year. This is really exciting because existing buildings are the majority of our emissions. And so we're beginning to engage existing building owners to ask them to track their water and energy use and look at ways to bring it down. So it's the beginning of a conversation with a lot of folks around the island about how to do that. And that program is going very smoothly and we're excited about it. To speak to targeted universalism, again, one of the programs that we have coming up that we're very excited about, and we've talked to HSEO, we've talked to Gwen, who everyone seems in this room to love, and I know why, because she's great, and others, is a program that is we're basically intending to design a program that's about accomplishing retrofits to affordable multi-unit housing on Oahu. And the intent here is to say there's a ton of money in the IRA. There's a lot of things we can do with retrofits, but we know that these buildings struggle just to fix the plumbing and get a new paint job, and they're not going to proactively go out and get these resources. So we're trying to design a program that really hand carries those resources to those building owners and hopefully increases participation tremendously. So if there's a building that's too hot because it wasn't ever intended to have anything other than good trade winds, we look at maybe adding insulation so they're not so hot anymore, or painting with a lighter color or whatever it might be. We add EV chargers possibly to that building. Again, targeting this program to buildings that have people that need the resources, not to those who can afford to do this without our intervention. I'm pausing because I don't know which one of my bullets I missed out on or left out, but I think I covered what I needed to cover. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for the collaboration. And I can't, it's been a long time since I've been in this room with the commission, but been doing this for a long time and very, very excited about the moment we're in, and really, really, really can't thank you enough for your efforts. That's it.
Thank you, Ben. I think I first met you when you were on Kauai and representing climate mitigation for Kauai.
Indeed, yes.
So Leo, are we ready to go to item 6?
Unless there are any questions?
Any questions from the members? Seeing none, any questions or comments from members of the public? Okay. Seeing none. So item 6, presentation on our environmental justice work. Do you want to introduce Park?
Yeah, so we have Parker Fukushima here from the Hawaii State Energy Office. Parker, I've made you a co-host if you have anything to share. Slides.
Perfect. Thank you, Leah. Let me just get that up and running. All right, looks good on your end?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Leah, and thank you to the commission, chairs and members, and all the guests for inviting me here today. I'm Parker Kushima. I'm the Outreach and Community Engagement Specialist and Clean Energy Wayfinders Coordinator with the Hawaii State Energy Office. And what I have to share with folks today, just a high-level overview and update around some of the work being done in Hawaii and nationally around defining and identifying disadvantaged communities in Hawaii, mainly looking at mapping tools and data that we can be utilizing to best tell the story of the communities of Hawaii, and very relevant following up on the past presentation. So some key questions I'd like for folks to think about as we go through this. Why is it so important to have robust definitions, tools, and resources that represent community needs and priorities as we understand them in Hawaii? How are we currently identifying and defining disadvantaged communities in our state? And also who should be a part of this continued conversation? So initially answering that first question, one of the big things, something I'm sure everyone in this room is very familiar with, are the slew of federal funding opportunities coming down the pipeline, and also Justice 40, which for those who are not as familiar, Justice 40 has the goal of at least 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments flowing to disadvantaged communities. And over there on the right, I have an overview of what the programs, relevant programs that are covered by Justice 40 are, a lot of which are coming through, as was mentioned before today, through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. And why this is so important for Hawaii is that in order for us to have a competitive opportunity for these grants, we have to be able to demonstrate that underserved communities in Hawaii and communities that we understand with local knowledge as disadvantaged or underserved are eligible for these Justice 40 programs. Overview of some of the work going on right now. Again, something folks in this room may be familiar with, the Climate Change Social Vulnerability Framework and Report provided to the Climate Change Commission in May of 2022, really looking at mapping or identifying what some of the current data sources, mapping tools that we're using and looking at to help identify social vulnerability in Hawaii, and also starting to look at how we match up causes, pressures in the systems and unsafe conditions in combination with climate change impacts that can cause or lead into social and climate change vulnerability. Some of the key findings from that, which we'll go over today as well. Creating a centralized data hub, one that doesn't lose out on the specificity and granularity of certain data sets that are used in it. Making sure that we can utilize the lowest available spatial scale for those data as well, so that we really are looking at not just communities, maybe at the census tract level or at other regional spatial boundaries that may be using a lot of data sets. So how can we really dive into that data and get the most level of granularity that we can? The need for capacity and expertise to really operationalize or social vulnerability indexes within our organizations, and calling out that there are many data gaps, even within the many organizations who are contributing to this source or this set of data for Hawaii. This is just a quick list, won't go over all of it, but some tools and mapping tools and resources that folks within the Climate Commission, within the state and county agencies and beyond are using to identify disadvantaged communities and identify social vulnerability in Hawaii. There at the top is a link to the Climate Change Commission's resource overview on their website, a list of other things there. And then at the bottom, most importantly, community mana'o, or those stories, those maybe sometimes less quantifiable sources of data that are equally important to fully understanding the picture of social vulnerability and characterization of disadvantaged communities in Hawaii. And final slide for current work in Hawaii. This is just a sample of some organizations and groups that are working towards this. Again, non-exhaustive as was the previous list, but just pointing out some in particular. The Energy Equity Hui, with me coming from the State Energy Office, having a bit of more purview into the energy side of this, but the Energy Equity Hui in particular, looking at how do we define the language that we use around social vulnerability, around equity and energy equity, so that we're making sure we're all speaking the same language, literally. Coastal Zone Management, Broadband Hui, Oahu MPO, in partnership with the City and County of Honolulu, also have work going on around data collection and identification of social vulnerability. And also there have been some previous cross-sectoral meetings where we provided overviews very similar to this and updates around current work, both within the Energy Equity Hui and out of the Climate Commission as well. So that was an overview of things going on in Hawaii. So how does that compare to the data at the national level? One of the main tools that we've been looking at is the CJEST, the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, which was developed by the Federal Council on Environmental Quality, or CEQ. And while this isn't the end-all be-all tool at the federal level, it is the one that is specifically noted within the Justice 40 guidance from the White House as a tool to help states identify disadvantaged communities that may help in the justification in federal applications. And this is just a rundown of the different metrics or criteria that went into that methodology for CJEST. Now, looking at the CJEST in terms of Hawaii, what we see here highlighted in gray are at the end of the methodology and their criteria, the census tracts in Hawaii that are considered disadvantaged by the CJEST metric. And I don't think I have to explain to a lot of folks in the room that this image here does not show an accurate representation of what we in Hawaii may consider disadvantaged or underserved communities. So really highlighting the importance of why we need to, as Ben and many other folks were saying before, really increase our collaboration and sharing of data amongst ourselves so that we all have a common understanding of how we're looking at disadvantaged communities, and then sharing that as well with the CEQ and with folks at the federal level to make sure that nothing is lost or slips through the cracks. A quick overview of just some preliminary limitations of the CJEST. One is that, and similar tools to this too. One is the binary definition of disadvantaged versus not disadvantaged communities, rather than representation as a range. If you do dig into the data for this, you can find and line up the percentiles for each of the criteria for the CJEST. But something that we found, and that through talking with folks who deal with data and utilize these resources, both at the state, county, agency, community, and policy levels, is that the visual representation is just as important, if not sometimes not more important, but immediately important in the representation and the representation of this data, because these maps may be the first, if not the only, view that decision makers, whether it's at the state or federal level, have into what is considered disadvantaged communities. So something we really want to be mindful of as we look at how we want to represent that. Again, I mentioned this before, but missing data where Hawaii is a big contributor to this. Third bullet there, in a lot of federal mapping tools and even a lot of our mapping tools here in Hawaii, the communities are defined by usually nationally or federally recognized geological boundaries such as census tracts. And while that makes sense in a lot of cases because that's what the data is represented in, especially when we're talking about how do we bring community into this process, and we want to think about ways that we can collect data, represent data at levels or at geographical boundaries that may be more locally relevant. For example, by Ahupua'a or on Oahu, we have neighborhood board districts as well. And the final bullet there, the low income eligibility, which for the CGES is a shared metric across all of the categories, is set at 200% of the federal poverty level. I believe it's something like 65th, above the 65th percentile for 200% federal poverty level, which especially in Hawaii can be rather restrictive, especially when taking into consideration that it is a binary definition of disadvantage. So one immediate option that we have to look at for the income qualification for tools like this, and it was mentioned before, the asset limited, income constrained and employed, or ALICE metric, which among other things does represent a more inclusive income metric, which does account for expenses, typical household expenses, such as you can see there, housing, childcare, food, transportation, and others. So not just looking at income, but also how does income play into the actual quality of life and living expenses of folks here in Hawaii. Just following up on that, a quick visualization, again, from the energy perspective, but this is a map that we put together around ALICE and poverty, since ALICE is a more inclusive metric than poverty, proportions within different census tracts across the state, or I believe actually this is zip code, and lining them up with energy projects across the state. So this is just one example of how in our office, we're looking at ALICE as an income metric to understand disadvantaged communities by proximity to energy projects across the state, both renewable and fossil fuel. So again, that's just one facet of this very multifaceted and cross-sectoral conversation. So a quick update and overview of where we're going with this. As many of you folks know, HB 441 and its companion bill, SB 657 from the 2023 legislative session did not pass, which among other things was looking to appropriate funds for the development and development of a database and data portal for many of the disparate data sources and resources that I've listed above and beyond. So I just wanted to point out, I know this is probably on a lot of folks' radar, but as this is a very high priority for all of us in the room, as well as making sure, across the state that we are really making the case for federal funding coming in through Hawaii. Just pointing out that this remains a high priority, something that I do highly suggest we continue to pursue in the 2024 legislative season. And along the lines of that current work going on, as Leah mentioned before, the Climate Change Commission is also hiring an environmental justice data specialist. So really, illuminating that we are building capacity both within the Climate Commission and raising the priority of this work across state and county agencies and beyond across the state. So while capacity and bandwidth and coordination are always going to be issues, not only in this category, but across many things, just want to stress that it is definitely a high priority for us all. Finally, ending off here, a couple of, again, laying out some priorities and next steps. One, really stressing this before, and it was stressed a lot from previous presenters, but making sure that we're coordinating not just between us here in this room, but between all organizations and agencies in Hawaii, state, county, private, nonprofit, and especially community. Let's make sure that we're sharing data, making sure that folks know where that data is, who is collecting it, and what the current gaps are, so that we have, again, a shared understanding of where we are as a state. working together through that coordination to define those deliverables, building upon what's already laid out in the social vulnerability report. Again, hiring the data specialists as well as other positions to help build that capacity, to make sure that we're continuing our communication and raising this issue at the federal level, connecting with the CEQ and other organizations who deal with data collection at the federal level, to make sure that we're sharing any of the and looking to fill and update any of the missing Hawaii data, and also where relevant, it's the methodology itself, if that's possible. And as always, identifying funding and related to that capacity to make sure that this work moves forward and that we keep it as a high priority for all of us here. With that, that's all that I have for you folks today. And my email there, if anyone is interested in following up on any of this information and this continued conversation around disadvantaged communities and mapping tools. So again, mahalo everyone for having me, and open if anyone has any immediate questions.
Hey, Parker, thank you. And you're no stranger to this commission because you've been working with us for several years. Thank you. Any questions for Parker on this presentation? Members of the public, any comments?
This question.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, Parker. I'm Diana Fulton from the Department of Health. I also sit on the State Hazard Mitigation Forum, which is run through HAIMA, and we met yesterday, our quarterly meeting, and had a really extensive conversation about FEMA's hazard risk index that was on your slide. And one of the things that came up is that it sounds like there's some efforts from multiple states to try to push a factor of isolation or access as part of these disadvantaged community calculations. It's not currently in the FEMA risk. And it didn't look, from my quick look at the CGEST, it didn't look like that either. And that would be a suggestion or a question is, have you guys thought about promoting that possibly to the CGEST folks about thinking about isolation as a component of vulnerability or disadvantagedness, whether it's access to medical services or emergency services, you know, think one road in, one road out kind of places, thinking about places like Hana, even up on our, you know, windward side here on Oahu, where we know the road is vulnerable, but long distances to medical services or other kinds of services, I think adds to that. I think you could think about that as Hawaii for Hawaii as a whole. I think about it because Kalaupapa shows up as not vulnerable in all of these, you know, indices, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So that's just one more thing to consider adding, and I'll connect with you offline and connect you with some of the folks at HAIMA that are working on this as well, because I think the conversations are so similar. It would be really great to put you guys together.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for the question, for connecting with me afterwards. I think, you know, isolation and access is definitely a huge factor for consideration of disadvantage. I was taking a look at the US DOT's recent tool as well and seeing how that lines up versus the CGEST. I think that one in particular is getting closer, though definitely still has a lot of gaps. So I'm really interested in following up and seeing where we can take that. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Parker? Not seeing any. Thank you, Parker. We appreciate that. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Okay, we've reached the final agenda item. It's item 7, coordinators updates. So Leah, our statewide climate change coordinator, take it away.
Thank you again, Mary Alice. So I know I promised everybody that we'd be out of here before 5, so don't worry. So I wanted to share with you folks, I said both Senator Gabbard and Representative Lowen spoke about this program. It's a program that was put together by the U.S. Climate Alliance Natural and Working Lands Research Team, which is a collaboration between U.S. Forest Service, DLNR, and some nonprofit organizations, really bringing attention to the fact that our, agricultural sector needs some additional support, as our commissioners well know. So this really brings funding and helps to fill the gaps from federal funding, which is really hard to access for a lot of our local producers. looking at forestry, farming, and ranching, and how we can start to help folks get over the hurdle of implementing these climate smart practices that also increase productivity, enhance resilience, again, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and enhance and achieve our food security and development goals. So we actually were awarded $270,000 last fiscal year. We closed the RFP, we had 3 applicants, and we have, that's a mistake, it should be said, 230,000 to award, because with the other 70,000, we started a position for a climate specialist to help run this program. And that position is open. So if you know anybody who is passionate about agriculture, it could be forestry, farming, ranching, anything, also, you know, has maybe a little bit of love for state bureaucracy, have them reach out to me. The position's open till June 30th. And the great news is we do have another $1 million for FY24. So we'll be able to perpetuate this program, open it up to more entities, and really get it going. And I also wanted to highlight that this program is in coordination with the Manoa Climate Smart Commodities grant that was awarded. They got $40 million to look at developing tools to help us statewide at measuring carbon sequestration and really soil health, and making sure that our practices are really where they're at, and that we can have better data here, because we really have a lack of data within the state. Also to help develop a market so that we can elevate products that are more sustainable and regenerative. And also, probably the most important piece of this is get money to our producers so that they can be better funded and can take these steps forward, because they're not cheap, they're not easy, and provide them with the technical assistance and funding that they need to get that going. So that's a quick overview in that, and then I'm going to pass it on to Joe to talk about our climate community fairs.
Yes, an exciting piece of news that we have. Some of you may have heard about it already, but this summer, the Climate Commission hosted its first ever series of climate fairs. They were located on Oahu and in Hilo on Big Island. It was very generously sponsored by the Hawaii State Energy Office, so a big mahalo to them for that. It was a great opportunity to meet goals, one of them being for community members to have an outlet to learn about climate change, access resources and information for climate actions. Another goal was for the Commission to be able to connect with community members, because the Climate Commission has done a lot of high-level policy work in the past and not so much on the side of community outreach. And another goal that it met was giving local organizations who work in the area of climate change, sustainability, to be able to connect with each other and network across sectors, be that government, nonprofit, advocacy organizations. The Oahu Fair took place on the state capitol grounds in May. We had 18 organizations attend that and around 200 community members. The Big Island Fair took place just last weekend at the Hilo Civic Center, and we had around 50 local organizations attend that and around 150 community members. The fairs were a huge success. We had organizations who attended provide hands-on activities. Focus areas included clean energy, sustainable transportation, conservation and preservation of natural resources, climate-friendly food choices, disaster preparedness, and political advocacy. Community members were very engaged. We saw a lot of engagement. We had a free raffle at both events as well. Each one of them had a bike giveaway as a grand prize to promote sustainable transportation, as well as other smaller prizes to help promote clean environment, clean lifestyle, with things like reusable utensils, a solar farm charger, native plants.
Was that bike one of the prizes?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Our bike was a grand prize.
Sustainable transportation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. With the surveying we've done so far with the organizations who participated, 100% of them reported a high level of satisfaction with the event. So they definitely or probably recommend it to a friend or colleague. Organizations also reported a very high level of engagement and interest from people who attended, as well as that they appreciated the opportunity to network and collaborate with other organizations. And in the future, we do hope to make this an annual event. We also hope to expand to more neighbor islands besides Oahu and Big Island. And on the slide is just some of the feedback we've heard so far from the organizations who participated. Again, a lot of really good community engagement, a lot of networking, a really great opportunity to raise awareness about climate change and really empower people to take climate action, advocate, live sustainably. So all good things there.
Thanks, Joe. And just a real big shout out to both Joe and Kara, who really took the lead on this and put them together and made them happen, as well as to the other vistas that put a lot of hard work into this too. Next, I'll invite Kiana Otsuka from the Hawaii State Energy Office to share on our Mobility Hub study.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Kiana Otsuka. I'm the VMT and Active Transportation Specialist with the Hawaii State Energy Office. And I assist Leah and the State Climate Commission with our Oahu Mobility Hub study. I know we have a couple of new folks in the audience, so I want to very quickly introduce the study to you folks. So first, Mobility Hub is a place where people can seamlessly connect to multiple modes of transportation. So as you see in the photo, it could include, for example, bike share, and case locally of the on Oahu would be the Piki, for example. A scooter share, maybe somewhere where you can pick up your delivered items, often near really high quality transit lines, such as the bus line, maybe a future rail station. It could include a car share and other communal space. So it's really meant to make better use of our public spaces and really give the opportunity of folks to take more active and shared modes of transportation.
Kiana, for some reason you've gone a little echoey. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, is this better without the mask?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this study is being managed by the Climate Commission and funded via the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization federal planning funds, and then the non-federal match is being provided by the Climate Commission. And the primary objective of the study is to identify good candidate sites for us to potentially implement mobility hubs on Oahu. Next slide, please. And I just want to give you a quick update of what we've done since our last commission meeting. We have developed our typologies memo, which includes the methodology for us to identify and evaluate potential mobility hub sites. We've also updated our parking inventory. So we're looking to count and update our state parking inventory. So a lot of our DAGs owned parking spaces are pretty regularly inventoried, but we don't have a complete state parking inventory for other state facilities. So we've developed some instructions and gave a presentation to our volunteers who are going to help us go out and count parking spaces, including a lot of folks from your agency. So thanks very much. And then we'll begin counting parking now. And then finally, we wanted to share a little bit more about our typologies approach memo. So we've finalized that and met with our working group to talk through that more specifically and what data is available for us to analyze different sites. And so we'll be looking more at criteria, kind of listed it more in detail here, but criteria looking at improving mobility, resiliency, equity, and and sort of economic vitality. So things like partnership opportunities. So I want to keep it really brief, but I'm happy to answer questions if needed.
Mahalo, Kiana.
Any questions from?
Well, let's move on because Amy has to go and Kiana can say.
Sorry, I'm gonna give my update. I'll apologize ahead of time. Camp might, kick my kid to the curb if I don't go get him. Right. But Leah asked me just to give you. Oh, did you want to introduce it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Just a quick update on our Punaluu feasibility assessment. Feasibility assessment for nature-based solutions at Punaluu Beach Park. Just as a very quick reminder, this was This project comes from a grant for the Climate Commission from US DOT in partnership with the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Climate Commission, with the funds coming down through OCCL and in partnership with Sea Grant, right? That's a lot of folks involved there. So at this point, we've had our contract with Sea Engineering for about 8-9 months going now, I would say. And the geotechnical surveys and the engineering side of the work that they're doing is ongoing. Coming up as we're getting into the better weather, a better weather window for them to do some of the on-water work and the biological surveys, as well as assessing whether there is a sand source offshore. They're going to be doing some more of that work. As a reminder, this project is geared towards trying to identify this spot on the Kamehameha Highway. There is still beach park between the ocean and the highway. So seeing if we can utilize that beach park area to both revitalize the natural resource, as well as use those nature-based solutions to protect the transportation infrastructure along there. The community outreach engagement part we took between the Climate Commission and Sea Grant out of the contract with Sea Engineering to do some of that on a more ongoing basis. We've done a number of events so far. We've presented at the neighborhood board. We've done 3, I think, different beach days on site to do surveys and discussions with beach users there, both during the week and on the weekends. We had a presence at the Ha'ula Resilience Community Fair, as well as at both the Ha'ula and the Punaluu Community Association meetings. So it's been a lot of education of folks and just talking to people initially about what's important to them at the park, what they use the park for, what their vision is. And we really started that process early so that we don't end up where we often do with engineering diagrams of, here's 3 proposals, which one do you want? To really use the community input and what people value at that park. And what we've heard so far from people is a lot of long-term cultural significance of the park there, of memories of gathering opihi at the park that is not possible anymore because of various erosion and pollution issues. And we've also have a survey out that links from our story map and from our outreach materials. We've only got 15 of them back so far, but we'll be doing some more. One thing that we found when we've done particularly the community association meetings, which are a little bit less formal than the neighborhood boards, you can have a little bit more discussion, is in March, was it March, Joe? I think when we were at the Punaluu Community Association meeting, I was talking about the timelines of this. The feasibility analysis is in the first quarter of 24 that's due to us. And then that might lead to feeding into an environmental assessment, which will then feed into, permitting for a large project. And people hear years, right, which is pretty accurate, and ask, like, what can we do now? What can the community do now? So we just recently, last week, the dune restoration specialist, a colleague of mine with Sea Grant, who's based on Maui, came over to take a look at the park with us. We met with the parks and met with the Parks and Rec folks here, who are all on board with us doing any work that we hope to do in the park. Very supportive, as well as another of our Sea Grant colleagues who's on the North Shore and has done a lot of community-based work, both with the work at Sunset Beach Park, but also some other areas up there, to look and see if there's areas where we can do some outplantings and some dune restoration work, even in advance of sort of the bigger feasibility assessment. And so we're working up those plans and are going to take those back to the community association to propose a few different areas where we may be able to do some outplantings and some maybe connect the community with the Parks Department Adopt a Park program to help to connect the community that uses the park even more to the care and maintenance of the park. And so that's sort of the status. That is, it's a little bit of a side project from the big feasibility analysis, but really felt there was a need there, and people want to know what they can do to help the park. So the goal with that, and just in general, is people want to be able to keep the grassy areas, to be able to still have picnics and all of that. So finding ways to do some dune restoration in areas that won't impact park use so much, so they won't get trampled anyway when we do the outplantings, and to keep the community engaged as we continue to move forward and hopefully meet actually like 3 goals there of protecting the natural resources and revitalizing them, protecting the highway, and giving the community back access, improved access to their park, which is a very well used and loved park now. But that's just a quick update on where we're at with that.
Yes. What happened to Mr. Tang? Is his house still there?
His house is still there. He has pushed it back as far on the property as possible.
Push it out of the property?
I think he is. I'm not sure. Ask Trevor. But unfortunately on that, there is still a lot of material, right? It's not in the park, but it's in state lands. It's in the wash zone that he took out. As you know, all of the bigger materials in advance of that board meeting, but there is still, and actually interestingly, some of the more, the areas of the park that might be better for doing some restoration are down at that end.
So,
and not across the property line, but you know, there's some, no, not across the property line. They're still within the park boundaries, but down at that end of the park, there's some areas where the high wash is really starting to come up almost into the road, but there's also a lot of sand right there. And so we're thinking that we might be able to do some planting to stabilize that sand and protect the road. And I don't think it's being much used. This is a reason why we have to go back to the community with it. I don't think that area down at that south end of the park is being largely used, in part because there was all of the debris and the stacks of sandbags that were there until recently. So, and there's not grass there, there's sand. So I'm hopeful that that might be one of the areas that we can do a little bit of advanced
just
work.
to brief, this is the matter that came before the land board. And the land board, $188,000 of fines to Mr. Tang, the landowner, because he had put unauthorized beach erosion, burrito sandbags. So the land board fined him $188,000. However, it also gave him an option. You can move your house off the property, let the natural beach take its course, because it is inevitable that beach is going to, and then the board would waive its fine. And he could consider conveying that property to the county.
So I do believe he's working with DPP now
very
on
good.
doing that right
Very
with
good.
his permits. But it's the house you can see in the end of that picture. And that was before he moved it back. You can't see the erosion stuff in the end, but that's Mr. Tang's house. But you wouldn't see it now because he's pushed it all the way back as close to
Probably violating a
possibly in the
setback law.
highway setback.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but
I'm sure. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have to excuse myself if there's no other
Thank you for-
questions.
Thank you for waiting.
In case of traffic.
Appreciate it.
And I can share Amy's contact information if any questions do arise.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Amy.
Do
Thanks,
that.
Amy.
Have you got one more person who's gonna
I
Okay.
have just letting folks know our meeting schedule.
Okay.
So our next meeting is Thursday, August 10th. And then we'll have another meeting November 9th. I believe you should have holds on your calendar. If not, I will send those out shortly.
Okay.
And then if there's any questions, I think Tiana's still on the line for the Mobility Hub, or any questions about the Climate Fair or the Climate Smart program. No, okay.
Good. All right. So co-chair, I can hold with motions to adjourn because they're not needed.
Okay,
under,
yeah, that's good.
Robert's rules. So if there's no other announcements or comments, this meeting is adjourned.
Aloha, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Aloha.
Aloha.